News had just broken about Pastor Charles Jenkins, and it spread like fire through the gospel community. People could not believe what they were hearing. A man who had always been a symbol of strength, faith, and encouragement was suddenly in the middle of a health crisis that no one had expected. Fans were shocked, church members were left in tears, and even those outside the gospel world were stunned by the announcement. You won't believe how fast this news shook people everywhere. And let me tell you, it was not just another story. It was something that touched hearts very deeply. Charles Jenkins had been known for many years as more than just a pastor. He was a leader, a songwriter, and a man who stood on stages with a voice that carried hope to millions. From Chicago to countries across the world, his music had reached people of all ages and backgrounds. His songs, Awesome in War, were not just hits. They became anthems of victory and faith. People sang them in small churches, at massive conferences, and in their own homes during times of struggle. These songs reminded them to keep fighting, to keep believing, and to never give up. But here's the shocking part. While people were gaining strength from his music, Charles Jenkins himself was quietly fighting a battle no one could see. This is where it gets interesting. Jenkins had always been loved because he was real. He was not the kind of leader who pretended to be perfect or untouchable. He shared his struggles, his doubts, and his personal faith journey. People felt connected to him because he was approachable and honest. Yet, even with this openness, his health struggles remained hidden. Outwardly, he was strong. His ministry was still running, his social media looked active, and his presence on stage seemed as powerful as ever. But behind the scenes, his body was slowly wearing down, and the signs of his health problems could no longer be ignored. The craziest part was how sudden the news felt. For months, people had no idea that anything was wrong. He was still appearing in public, still preaching, still giving his energy to fans and followers. Then suddenly, confirmation arrived that his health had taken a serious turn. What makes the story different is that it was not about some scandal or rumor. It was about a man known for carrying others, now being forced to step back because of his own condition. Destiny took an unexpected turn, and the very man who had preached about strength and resilience was now the one in need of prayers and support. As the news spread, people began to ask countless questions. How did things reach this point? Was it caused by stress, the endless travel, the heavy weight of leading both a church and a global music career? Or was it something even deeper? No one knew the full details because not everything was shared publicly. That mystery only fueled the emotions of his followers. And what do you think about this? For years, millions leaned on Charles Jenkins for faith and courage. Now, they found themselves wondering if he had been silently carrying his own cross all along. The reality was hard to accept. Charles Jenkins, the same man who told people to hold on, who reminded them that victory was possible, was now in a fight of his own. His fans, his church, and his community were left speechless, realizing that even their strongest leaders were still human. And this was only the beginning of a story that promised to be more shocking, more emotional, and more revealing than anyone could have imagined. When the first whispers about Charles Jenkins's health began, many people ignored them. Some thought it was just another rumor because in the gospel world, stories often spread without truth behind them. But this time, the whispers were not just empty talk. They came from people close to him, people who had seen him struggling quietly. At first, fans refused to believe it. How could a man so full of energy, passion, and fire suddenly be facing a health challenge? But here is the shocking part. Very soon, confirmation arrived and the truth could no longer be hidden. Reports began to surface that medical professionals had advised Jenkins to slow down immediately. His busy schedule, the constant traveling, the recording sessions, and the heavy responsibility of pastoring had all started to take a toll on his body. This was not a small issue. According to those close to him, the situation was serious enough that he had to step back from many of his projects. Performances were canceled, speaking engagements were paused, and fans who expected new music were left in confusion. This is how the gospel world realized that something was truly wrong. But this is where it gets interesting. For years, people had admired Jenkins for his strength and his constant presence. He was everywhere, on stages, in churches, on social media, and suddenly that energy was gone. The shift was so dramatic that it left the gospel community speechless. The craziest part was that his absence only made people more curious. What was really happening behind the scenes? Why were there no details about his exact condition? What makes this story different is the silence. The official updates never revealed exactly what he was facing. There was no clear answer. Was it a physical illness, stress-related exhaustion, or something else entirely? The lack of detail created an atmosphere of mystery, and speculation grew. Some believed he had been hiding his struggles for months, choosing to appear strong in public even as his health weakened. Others wondered if the pressure of being both a pastor and an artist had finally pushed him to the breaking point. Destiny took an unexpected turn when the gospel world realized that Jenkins was not invincible. His health update showed that even those who inspire millions are still human, still vulnerable, and still in need of care. Social media platforms lit up instantly. Hashtags like #PrayForJenkins began trending. Fans shared personal testimonies about how his songs had carried them through dark times, and now they were ready to carry him through his. Gospel artists, pastors, and leaders also spoke out, calling him a warrior of faith and asking everyone to lift him in prayer. And what do you think about this? For years, Jenkins had given strength to others, but now the world was being asked to give strength back to him. The shift was powerful. People who once looked up to him as a leader now realized that even their strongest leaders needed support too. And this was only the beginning of a bigger storm, because the silence around his exact health condition left the public waiting, wondering, and desperate for answers. When Charles Jenkins finally chose to speak about his situation, people were expecting fear, sadness, or silence. But instead, his words carried the same strength and hope that had defined his entire ministry. You won't believe how he responded. He did not hide from the truth, and he did not pretend that nothing was happening. He spoke honestly, admitting that the storm was real, but so was his faith. In his message, he reminded his followers that challenges come to everyone, but God's presence remains in every storm. Let me tell you, this moment was unforgettable. Instead of breaking down, Jenkins used his own pain as a testimony. He said that while his body was under pressure, his spirit was still unshaken. His words spread across social media within minutes. Fans reposted them with captions like, "This is true faith in action." Fellow gospel artists and pastors also shared his message, saying he was no longer just preaching hope, he was living it. But here is the shocking part. His words were not only for himself, they became a lifeline for others who were struggling silently with sickness, depression, or personal battles. This is where it gets interesting. The man who wrote War, a song about fighting back against struggles, now found himself in the middle of his own war. And instead of giving in, he was standing firm with the same message he had given to millions. People around the world began saying, if Charles Jenkins can keep the faith during his battle, then so can I. What makes this story different is that Jenkins wasn't just inspiring through music anymore. He was inspiring through his response to real-life pain. The craziest part was how deeply his message touched people. In an era where many leaders hide their weaknesses, Jenkins was open about his struggle. He even admitted that part of his journey was learning balance, that sometimes slowing down is not weakness, but wisdom. He told people that even leaders need to rest, that self-care is not selfish, and that protecting your health is also a spiritual responsibility. This shocked many in the church community, where leaders are often expected to be strong at all times. Destiny took an unexpected turn as people began to realize that Jenkins was not only healing himself, but also teaching others a powerful lesson about life. And what do you think about this? A man fighting his own health battle was still reminding the world to take care of themselves, to lean on family, faith, and community, and to never see rest as weakness. His voice, though quieter than before, carried a truth that shook the gospel world in a whole new way. But as powerful as this was, one question remained unanswered. How serious was his condition, and what did it mean for his future? The answers to that would take this story into even deeper and more emotional territory. As days passed after the health update, the conversation began to shift. At first, people only asked, "Is Charles Jenkins okay?" But slowly, a bigger question started rising. What does this mean for the entire gospel community? And let me tell you, this was not a small question. Jenkins' story was no longer just about one man's health. It became a mirror, showing the hidden struggles of many pastors and gospel leaders who carried heavy burdens while hiding their pain. You won't believe how many people began speaking out after this. Stories surfaced about pastors collapsing from exhaustion, gospel artists facing burnout, and leaders silently battling depression because they felt they could never step back. But here's the shocking part. Jenkins's health scare forced people to admit that even leaders were human. This is where it gets interesting because for years, the culture of ministry had created an image of leaders as superhuman, always available, always strong, and always ready to pour into others. And now destiny took an unexpected turn, showing the world that without rest and care, even the strongest voices could fall silent. What makes the story different is the way it has sparked a new conversation. Fans, church members, and even critics began asking, are we expecting too much from our leaders? Do we love the music more than the musicians? Do we care about the sermons more than the health of the pastors who preach them? The craziest part was how quickly these questions spread across social media. It wasn't just about Charles Jenkins anymore. It was about the system, the expectations, and the pressure that could break even the most faithful servants. Through it all, Jenkins remained a symbol of resilience. His willingness to be open about his battle reminded people that faith was not about pretending everything was perfect. It was about standing strong, even in weakness. And while no one knew exactly what the future of his ministry and music would look like, one thing was clear. He had already created a new kind of legacy, a legacy of honesty, balance, and courage to face storms with faith. And what do you think about this? A health update that began with shock ended with a lesson the gospel world desperately needed to hear. The truth was that Jenkins' battle was not just his own. It belonged to everyone who had ever pushed themselves too hard, ignored the signs of exhaustion, or carried more than they could handle. In his struggle, the world saw its own reflection, and in his resilience, they saw a new path forward. The story of Charles Jenkins was not finished, but even in this chapter of weakness, he continued to lead, not from the pulpit, not from the stage, but from his own life. His journey reminded everyone that rest was wisdom, self-care was necessary, and faith could carry you through even the darkest storms. And that message, perhaps, was even greater than the songs that first made him famous.